Hello, everybody. I am Bronsvoort. I am the founder of Circular Cycling and one of the directors of Shift Cycling Culture, a non-profit organization on a mission to making cycling as a sport more sustainable. In 2020, I published a book called From Marginal Gains to a Circular Revolution, which is a practical guide on how we can create a sustainable cycling industry. I am very honored to be here, talking about sustainability to the production powerhouse of the cycling industry. In the next 25 minutes, I will tell you about how sustainability is becoming more important for the bicycle industry, about how you can join over 50 global cycling brands in reducing CO2 emissions by signing the Shift Cycling Culture climate commitment. And I will give you an outlook on how the cycling industry can transform itself from a so-called linear to a circular industry. Note that my focus is on the sports cycles, but the story is very applicable to any type of bike and apparel. I will start by telling you a bit about my background. Being Dutch, I have been cycling all my life. I studied civil engineering at Delft University of Technology and worked in London and the Netherlands on innovation projects in the construction industry. Back in 2009, our main clients started asking us questions about our carbon footprint and how we were going to reduce this. I took on the challenge to figure out how this all worked. I got both anxious about the potential impact of climate change, as well as excited about the role of design to reduce the impact that we were causing. It was quite a journey, which got me to reduce my own impact as well. I installed solar panels, bought a plug-in hybrid, and reduced flying. And just like the cycling industry today, I used to tell everyone I was cycling and thus contributing to a lower carbon transport system. But then I discovered a box in my shed. If you are a bike freak like me, you may recognize this. A box with bike parts that are too good to throw away, but we will never use again. I asked my friends if they had such a box, and they too all had it. And that really got me thinking. Yes, the bicycle is one of the ways to reduce CO2 emissions. And yes, we should do everything we can to get more people riding bikes instead of cars. But we seem to forget that many bikes are never used for replacing cars, and that we use vast amounts of high-tech materials for the production of bikes and apparel. That extracting these materials from the earth, making steel, aluminium, lithium for batteries, and all the transport involved causes a significant amount of CO2 emissions. And we seem to forget the waste created once users are done using our products. Some 5 years ago, I set up a shop to experiment with how the cycling industry could do better. Together with a good friend, Matthijs, I founded Circular Cycling. Not long after, I met Leon and Jane, and together we set up Shift Cycling Culture Foundation to spark a conversation about sustainability and trigger change across the cycling community and industry. You may wonder, why do we think sustainability is so important? Well, first of all, there's one quite simple long-term reason why we should change. Living in a world disrupted by global temperatures rising above 1.5 degrees is simply not nice. Climate change is already having an impact. All over the world, we are seeing this on a daily basis as the news reports fires, storms, floods, and melting ice caps. It is truly affecting us now. But there are also 3 economic short-term reasons why our industry should change. The first is international agreements. In 2015, governments agreed in Paris to act to limit climate change. In November last year at COP26 in Glasgow, the same governments presented their plans on how to reach net zero emissions in 2050 and a 55% reduction by 2030. These are ambitious goals, and no sector can be excused or excluded. The EU Green Deal on climate change and circular economy already gives a lot of clues about what this will mean. More CO2 emissions will be taxed and at a higher rate. Large industries, such as steel and aluminium, will see their costs increase dramatically unless they are able to reduce their emissions. Imported goods, for example from Taiwan, will be taxed at the European border through the carbon border adjustment mechanism to create a level playing field. And shipping and airline will also start paying for their pollution, meaning that both will get more expensive. The second reason is finance. Large investors, such as pension funds, are increasingly aware that investing in companies that pose a risk to the climate also pose a risk to their long-term stability. There is a rapid shift going on from high-risk fossil fuel-based assets into green investments going on. Money is looking for sustainable companies because it reduces risk. And finally, companies' customers and employees care, and attitudes are changing. 5 years ago, this was not the case. No cycling brands was talking about sustainability. Magazines were not covering the subject. Consumers were not considering buying sustainable alternatives. That has all changed. Large media outlets are writing articles about the subject. Consumers used to buying sustainable products in the outdoor shop or supermarket will want to spend their money different in the cycling industry too. Brands are setting up sustainability reports and introduce more sustainable products. And they are reaching out to their suppliers to reduce their CO2 emissions too. The cycling industry, just like any other industry, has to take its responsibility and start cutting CO2 emissions related to the production and transport of products. This means reducing emissions by 55% in 2030 and becoming climate neutral in 2050. Targets that are in line with the Taiwanese governments. One of the things that we did at Shift Cycling Culture was to bring CEOs from different brands together to talk about how this can be done. These 14 CEOs soon realized that collective industry action and reducing their own emissions needed to be done, but that the biggest impact is in the supply chain. These CEOs wrote a letter to the industry, which developed into the climate commitment. This is an invitation to join them. In the letter, they say, we recognize the enormity of the challenge of meeting the EU Paris Agreement, and we will only be able if we innovate together to reduce emissions related to production, to create products that will last longer, work with customers on maintenance and lifetime extension, and develop a closed-loop system to recover materials. What the CEOs are asking the industry is to calculate the own CO2 emissions of their own operations according to the greenhouse gas protocol, and to make a plan how to reduce your emissions by at least 55% in 2030. About 50 companies signed the climate commitment after it was launched. I would like to invite you too, the Taiwanese cycling industry, to sign this letter. It will be a signal to your customers that you are ready to join them on their challenge. They want to make the cycling industry of an example of an industry that is not only providing a clean mode of transport, but also innovative, low-carbon products. And the climate commitment is just a start. With the Taiwanese proven innovation track record, I am sure that together we can make big steps in developing products that fit a low-carbon world. As I promised in my introduction, I will give you a first introduction of what the transformation to a circular economy would mean for cycling. And do you remember the box with parts in my shed that I talked about before? It turned out that they were no longer compatible with my bike, or they were out of fashion. I did buy some parts in the 2-for-1 sale, but I only used one. I will give you a brief summary of my book to explain why this matters and what can be done. Now, just like most industries, the cycling industry is operating a linear economic model. In a linear economy, we take, we make, and we waste. The model relies on buying cheap resources, making products at the lowest possible cost, and then selling as many products as possible. The sooner the user needs a new product, the better it is. The idea is to sell more and sell faster. But the result is that materials and all the energy required to make these products is wasted too. Sell more, sell faster results in waste more, waste faster. When we set up circular cycling, we found 3 incentives related to the product design, especially in the sports segment, that help this process. We found that products are often designed to be cheap or low weight. They often fail too soon, where just a little bit of extra material in the right spot would make them last forever. Products are outdated. If you need a replacement for, say, your 10-speed road shifter, it is very hard to find something compatible. Very often, this leads to people buying an entire new bike, because replacing the entire group set just does not seem worth it. And finally, fashion is not just something for the fashion industry. Consumers are very sensitive to the latest fashion, even if the gains are only marginal. The linear model not only causes ecological waste, but economic waste too. This picture shows what is called a value hill. It shows a 3-stage product life cycle and how the value of materials develops over the lifetime. During the pre-use phase, the supply chain adds value to raw materials through extraction, manufacturing, assembly, and distribution. The value of the materials extracted from the earth has risen from nothing to the money a cyclist is willing to pay in the shop. The user then enjoys the value of the bike for a certain period in the use phase. And at the end of the lifetime, the value of the bike is quickly destroyed when the user stops using the bike and it ends up in a landfill or an incinerator. The biggest impact of the bicycle is in the pre-use phase. The extraction of metals, oil, and other finite resources leave big holes in the ground. The production of steel, aluminium, carbon fiber, and batteries is very energy and carbon intensive. To give you an idea, according to Specialized, the production of a 1 kilogram aluminium frame requires about 1,600 kilowatt hours of electricity. That is about 50% of the annual electricity use of an average Dutch household. Trek launched their 2020 sustainability report. It shows that their total carbon footprint is about 300,000 tons. 80% of this is related to the production of their bikes. Now, what happens to all the wonderful products after the user stops using the product is hard to say. They often end up in a landfill or are burned in an incinerator, and the materials are lost forever. So, how do we as an industry improve the state of our planet by stopping the waste of all these valuable materials and pollution, and at the same time make money? The answer is to transition to a circular economy. And the concept of a circular economy is easy to remember. In a circular economy, we 1, no longer use finite resources, 2, there will be no pollution, and 3, there will be no waste. Here is that same value hill concept again, but now for the circular model. What you see is that there are no landfills and no incinerator where the value is lost forever. Instead, materials keep on flowing from resource to products and back to resource. Apart from cleaning up the manufacturing process, the trick to make money is to retain the value at the highest possible level on that value hill. This can be done through maintenance and repair of the bike to extend the use phase, by reusing or redistributing the bike from one user to the next, to refurbish the bike to make it as good as new again, to remanufacture parts in the factory into new parts, to recycle materials, and if that is not possible, bring the materials back into the biocycle, so they become foodstock for new plants. To make money in a circular economy, we will need to change the way we design our products, but also the way the business model works. I will quickly run through 5 business models and then explain in more detail how this could work for a road racing bike, one of the toughest products. The first model is refuse. This is the simplest one and has the biggest impact on the short term. Stop using all sorts of crap you don't really need. Makov just launched a good example, punk powder. Instead of transporting big bottles with mostly water all over the planet, they now offer a simple sachet with power. Simply add the powder to water in a bottle that you used before, and off you go. This saves 92% in packaging and the CO2 emissions related to shipping big bottles around the globe, and all the costs involved. The second model is durability. Make sure a product will last forever and people will be willing to pay more. Chris King headsets come with a lifetime warranty. Mine outlasted 3 of my mountain bikes, where before I was replacing headsets every year. The third is related to value retention on the value that I showed you before. The 4 R's: repair, resell, refurbish, remanufacture. Basically making money from products that are already out there. Even though repairing a bike with internal cable routing is more complicated than before, companies are making money of products that have been used before. The Pro's Closet is a great US-based example of a shop selling used and refurbished bikes on a large scale. The fourth model is sharing, renting instead of selling. I personally only need a super fancy rain jacket or all-mountain full suspension bike if I go on a multi-day trip to the mountains, which is not very often. Why spend hundreds or even thousands of euros on something that will end up unused in a box if I would be able to rent it? The rest of the year, someone else could be using these materials. And finally, and probably the model with the biggest impact, is pay for performance. Instead of buying a product, a user simply pays a fixed fee for the performance of the product. If the product fails or needs maintenance, the supplier will need to fix it as part of the contract. Swapfiets introduced this concept in the cycling industry years ago. For a fixed monthly fee, you get a bike. This could be a new bike, but also one that was used before. Swapfiets make sure it always works. You can imagine that this gives Swapfiets a very good incentive to create bikes that last forever with very little maintenance. Because every time a user calls that something is not working properly, it costs them money and not the user. Vittoria introduced something similar last summer: tire as a service. Vittoria supplies you with tires, and if you puncture or the tire needs replacement, Vittoria will cover the cost. And at the end of the lifetime, the tire returns to Vittoria, so they have an increasing volume of tires to make their recycling process more effective. Every organization, including the Taiwanese industry, can start implementing the first 2 business models tomorrow. The other 3 will require you to change the way your business operates. You will need more interaction with your users, a return logistics system, and quality control for used products. And we will need to change the way we design our products. To make the circular business model work, we will need to introduce circular design principles. Products need to be designed to, first of all, last forever. Second, be compatible and upgradable. Third, be easy to maintain and repair. And finally, use the right materials, non-toxic, from recycled or renewable sources, and recyclable or renewable at the end of the lifetime. How these concepts work for you depends on your product. It could well be a combination. In our book, we explore the opportunities for new business models for a road bike in more detail. We found that the pay-for-performance model works for a concept like Swapfiets, but is not directly applicable to a road bike. A road bike needs a second business model, durability. The frame set or platform is based on durability. It would be custom for the user and last forever. The group set is based on the performance model and paid on a monthly basis with the guarantee that it works. We call this the powertrain. This makes buying a bike more accessible because of a lower investment for the customer, and at the same time less risky because the user is not paying for the replacement parts. The supplier is responsible that the drivetrain always works. The role of data and technology is crucial. Every bike and part should get a digital bike passport. This passport should contain all the relevant information required to make the circular business model work. This includes maintenance and disassembly instructions, links to shops that have replacement parts in stock. It will store information about the use of a bike, like time, kilometers, watts, and potentially even weather conditions, a bit like SRAM is already doing with their Access app. It contains information about the materials, which materials are in the product, and at the end, and where did they come from, and how to handle these materials at the end of the lifetime. Send them back to the manufacturer, or maybe plant them in your garden? Just like better designs, this data will enable us to ride more kilometers with less materials. I want to share a short video as a summary of what I've just told.
Imagine that material wearing from your tires is biodegradable, that the lubricant washing from your chain no longer pollutes the forest, but provides valuable nutrients. Imagine a bike made from plant-based or recycled materials or reused parts. You no longer throw away your old bike like a piece of rubbish. Instead, you return it to the manufacturer so it becomes a resource for new bicycles. You would be living in a world with a circular economy. A world where you ride your bike in an environment without pollution, through forests larger and more biodiverse than today. A world where CO2 emissions no longer cause climate change, where we no longer dig up finite resources from the earth, but use our waste and renewable resources to make new products. To make the transition from our linear take, make, waste economy to a circular economy, marginal gains are not enough. To get there, we need a revolution.
I think that by now you understand the title of my book, From Marginal Gains to a Circular Revolution. To become a truly sustainable industry, marginal gains are not enough. We need a revolution. And now is the time to get started. Governments and investors will start to force you, and more customers will start to ask you. I would like to invite the Taiwanese bicycle industry to join the circular revolution. And at the same time, we realize that nobody is perfect, and that includes me. However, the Taiwanese industry is very creative and forward-thinking, and I'm confident that this can be done. As long as we start, however small. Start talking about it to colleagues, peers, friends, suppliers, and customers. And finally, please sign the Shift Cycling Culture climate commitments and show your customers that you are with them on this journey. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the sustainable products made in Taiwan.